Day 357 of the Ukrainian War Map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzy here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. And as always, we'll move across to those Russian losses, currently sitting on 139,770, so almost hitting a new milestone of 140k, just under 700 in the past 24 hours as well, in terms of Russian military losses there too. Then we'll take a quick look at the hardware, so 4 tanks, 7 APVs, 4 artillery, and even 2 air defense systems. Losses for the Russian army there as well. Then we'll move back across to the map, and as we sometimes do, we'll start out again in Russia, and this is where another fire broke out in the capital city of Moscow. At the Scientific Research Institute during Moscow's cold winter weather. Now, I don't put a lot of stock into these occurrences anymore. They could be happening for any number of reasons related to or not related to the war, but it is interesting to speculate why on occasion. Perhaps, for instance, maybe this Scientific Research Institute was testing a new fuel propellant, but I guess we'll never know. But probably what arouses more suspicion in Russia is when for instance, a gas pipeline explodes instead. Oh, and that actually did happen in Russia, in its Yaroslav Oblast earlier today as well. Then we'll move back to Ukraine, into the Donbass, a little bit to the north. I'll just quickly note here in Crimea, or the Crimea region, not a great deal of information is coming out of this area at the moment. It rarely does, but we do know there's been heavy fighting between enemy and defender in the last couple of days, quite intense fighting there. So we'll shortly see what might come of this area soon enough. Then we'll move across back to Bakhmut, where the Ukrainian forces launched a successful localized counterattack near Ivaniska, right along here to the south, stalling the assault somewhat of the Russian forces and pushing them slightly back even. In fact, if we just jump across to the map and zoom in here, we can have a look there, and in the last day or two, you can see they've been pushed back away from the highway. In fact, Russian forces are at least a few kilometers, maybe a couple of miles away from the main highway, making for a positive buffer. And it's clear to see the importance of this area when you zoom out, as it's been a case of the Ukrainian forces given it all she's got with mortar and artillery fire to push the Russian forces back. And I do know that the Ukrainian forces have been shelling day and night all around Bakhmut, but particularly this area in the last day or two, probably using well above average their typical use of their shelling munitions. Meanwhile, as we can see to the north, Russia has been making a bit of a run for the Northern Highway at various spots there. A highway that, do just note, that hasn't been used for Bakhmut's Ukrainian logistics and supply in quite some time. So one could fairly straightforwardly theorize that Ukraine would be spending additional resources on the southwest of Bakhmut that I just mentioned a moment ago to fortify positions at the potential cost of a northern highway that has lacked in strategic value for some time for the Ukrainian forces. And even right now, the somewhat cast out Wagner PMC boss, Prigozhin, is now saying that the battle for Bakhmut is far from over. Oh, and just north of here, I don't think I was in on the day, but Krasnohora was pretty much all but taken a few days ago by a combination of the Russian forces, which included some Wagner leftovers as well. And right now, all of those forces collectively are closing in on the remainder of the gap, which makes me cringe a little bit here, given the countless reports of Russian-friendly firing upon itself all the time. And the Russian forces that survive it, they even say it's just due to a lack of communications and a lack of up-to-date battlefield awareness. And I mean, it's one thing to go to war and be terminated by your own enemy, but going to war and being terminated by your own comrades, not great stuff. Then moving a bit further down on the map, Vuhledar. So another day, another Vuhledar blunder at the moment. This time it was a lonesome Russian TOS-1A rocket artillery system being taken out there, but definitely no Russian assaults going on here today. And fighting, in fact, is occurring more east in the town of Marinka right now, as pretty well indicated by the arrows here at the moment by the Russian forces pushing or attempting to push forward in that direction. And also note, Russia has held roughly half of Marinka for about 2 or 3 months now. So most recently, it wasn't working out for Russia in Vuhledar, so they thought they'd give Marinka another go and add reinforcements there instead. And that sounds like a joke, but it's really just the fluid and ever-changing approaches of the Russian army at the moment in this region. In fact, there's even something of a midway base, about 15 miles from Vuhledar, a bit of a makeshift base, and about 22 miles from Marinka. There it is, hanging there. And then somewhere in the east, a Ukrainian drone almost hand-delivered a highly reactive munition through the use of a piece of string, really it was a wire, to lower the device into a Russian T-80 tank, having been lowered right inside the gunner's hatch. And this is the type of, shall we say, precision guidance that you don't see performed every day. Unfortunately, with footage like this, I can't show the full footage, but if you're especially keen, it's hanging around on my Patreon page. Then we'll move across to a bit of news for the day. It has to be a slightly shorter video, but we'll start off with a bit of a tank update. So as it turns out, Denmark and the Netherlands won't be supplying Leopard 2 main battle tanks, at least for now. But the consolation prize is that they'll be sending 100 Leopard 1s instead. And the Leopard 1s were actually designed to take out earlier Soviet-era tanks like the T-62s, then later upgraded to be effective against T-72s and T-80s. Whereas the Leopard 2, which Ukraine will still get its plenty share of, have upgraded variants of those which are considered to be quite capable of taking out Russia's most modern and advanced tank, the T-14 Armata. Only one problem, it turns out that the Russian T-14 Armata tank doesn't actually exist. Well, not really anyway. It's a tank that just a few years ago was theoretically believed to be one of the best tanks on the planet, at least on paper, but then it turned out to basically be an over-budget, too expensive, and yet at the same time somehow a poorly funded through military corruption, low-volume prototype that would even conk out and require towing at a Russian military day parade, which I just have got to stop mentioning. Therefore, turning this conceptualized giant into a simple paper tiger. Then in some other somewhat related news, 60 Bradley M2 IFVs, so the infantry fighting vehicles from the US, have been spotted at a German port alongside an additional 280 units of various other equipment, including some MRAPs I can see there, as they are headed to training locations to get what will likely be the first of many, many more that Ukraine will receive over time from the US. And these vehicles, the Bradley M2s in particular, are great at providing infantry support, carrying a squad of up to 7 infantry soldiers, providing good protection from enemy fire, and also helpful for engaging enemy armor, such as tanks. And specifically also known for successfully taking out a number of Russian tanks in Iraq as well. So let them come. Then in another Russian military mobilization blunder, this one is almost like a bit of a news piece from Russia's renewed 2023 offensives. So this Mobic unit is filming an appeal, yes, another appeal, yet another appeal, with a very loud barking dog in the background. Quite annoying, but so these guys were switched from being the third line of defense in their region in the Donbass to becoming the assault troops of the operations. So as a result, they felt deceived, and on top of that, surprise, surprise, they haven't been provided adequate equipment either. But one key difference that I like about this one, so instead of appealing to some completely disinterested commander like they almost always do, they know better than that, these guys. So instead, they ask everybody to spread this message on social media, through Russian social media channels, that is, because they say the Russian MOD, so the Ministry of Defense, is performing illegal actions, and so they're effectively just letting everybody know how they've been mistreated. Actually, even mistreated to the point where they've been stripped of their IDs, military IDs, that were taken away from them. They've just received stamps instead, like cattle, which is probably a Russian government imposed strategy to make them unidentifiable after their untimely demise on the battlefield, thus silencing Russian internal dissent, in turn extending the operational capability of Russia feeding its war machine. Then just a quick funny to round it all off for today, guys. So did I ever tell you guys about top Russian propagandist Solovyov's son? Well, he's currently not mobilized. He has an official deferment for now. Good for him. And he's not even in the country. He's in London and says he isn't in the war because of contractual obligations with his modeling agency, doing his stylish makeup and manicure modeling thing. Although I do suspect he's probably not getting as much work in London now, given his biological affiliations. But the whole thing just reeks of hypocrisy, given that Daddy Solovyov calls on basically every able-bodied Russian male to die gloriously for his country and for Putla. So thanks for watching, guys. Please leave a comment, subscribe. Thanks for all of your support. Slightly shorter video today, better than none, I thought, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers.